28th, 2022. City Council's second monthly meeting. We have a number of items on a consent agenda. Is there anything anyone would like moved from the consent agenda to the regular agenda so it can be discussed? If not, a motion to approve those items?
Madam Mayor, I move that City Council approve the consent agenda as presented.
Is there any discussion? Not. Those in favor of approving the consent agenda say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. Ayes have it, and we are set with that. Okay, new business. Authorizing the hiring of contract city clerk and appointment of deputy city clerk. Mr. Conant.
Mayor Vogt, members of City Council, it's with great sadness announced that this week is Ms. Reese's last week with us as a full-time city clerk. She'll be taking a position with the town of Black Mountain beginning next week, but we're still going to need some clerk help, and so we have convinced her with some arm twisting this morning to contract with us to help us with agendas and minutes and things like that until we can hire a full-time clerk, which we're in the process of interviewing and hope to bring you a couple of candidates maybe as soon as next Thursday. But would like to contract with Angela Reese to continue to serve as our clerk until we can get that person hired and get them trained, but also to handle day-to-day signing of documents to appoint Daniel Hyman as deputy city clerk. That way we can get documents executed without having to bother Angela. So our recommendation is to authorize the city manager to enter into a temporary employment contract with Angela Reese to be our contract city clerk and appoint Daniel Hyman as deputy city clerk.
Any questions? Discussion or a motion?
I move the City Council authorize the city manager to enter into a contract with Angela Reese to serve as city clerk until a full-time city clerk can be appointed, and appoint Daniel Heyman as deputy city clerk.
Is there any discussion? Not. Those in favor of the motion for a contract city clerk and deputy city clerk say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. The ayes have it. Motion carries, and we will do that. Daniel isn't here tonight, is he?
No, ma'am.
Okay. Angela gave me the oath of office, so we can take care of that tomorrow.
Yes, if
I'll
that's
be in
okay.
tomorrow.
Okay. Yes,
Okay,
ma'am.
we'll get him sworn in. All right. Thank you. Presentations. American Rescue Plan appropriation discussion.
Afternoon, Mayor and members of the City Council. We as staff have met and reviewed our 18 applications for ARP funding. And this PowerPoint presentation is a summary of that review, the funding requests, and also the projects which funding is recommended for. At the end of the presentation, Mr. Conant has left his city manager's recommended appropriations for the ARP pot of money that we've discussed since we learned that we would receive ARP funding a couple years ago. So if Mr. Pauly could just advance the slide for me. I got it that time. So I'm just going to focus in on this slide and let council know that in the following slides there is more information available on each applicant. So a team of 5 city staff members independently reviewed each of these applications as far as professionalism, our legal ability to fund the application, and the impact we felt each application would have on the community. So we ranked all of these. Out of the group of 18, we identified the top 6 or 7 that would cost the city approximately $4 million. And from there, Mr. Conant narrowed down the list a little bit further. So I'm just going to pause here and help council if there are any questions about any specific applications, the scoring process, or the funding amounts. Yes, sir.
All of these got a score.
Yes, sir.
Like, there was a determination that was made that within the guidelines, these could potentially all receive money.
Yes, sir.
Gotcha.
Yes, and so there was 5 staff members, including Adam, Mr. Pauly, Ms. Beaker, John Buchanan, Crystal Powell, and was Jenny Floyd one of them? Is
Yes.
that all of us? So there
Yes.
may have been 6 of us
Yes.
that rated based on 4 criteria and from there we narrowed it from $8.4 million to what you'll see to $4 million, and then I took the $4 million and came up with a recommendation for the $2 million that we had available to spend.
Yes, sir.
So,
Yep.
and Adam has synopsis of all the projects. If you would like to see them, we can go through them, but this gives you the just overview of what they are. So.
It's all good. Yeah, so, just using Blue Ridge Community Health Services as an example, I tried to narrow these down to 2 or 3 sentences each, out of the total application packet, and just included the funding request. So if any of you have any specific questions about any of the nonprofits, we are happy to cover those. Obviously don't want to stand up here and read 18 full applications for.
Maybe if we could go through each slide, not read them, but go through each slide and just kind of share so that the public knows the types of projects that we received. I think that would be helpful. Again, just pause on them for a minute, mention what the funding request was, and then we'll go on through them, if that's okay.
Sure thing, John. So Blue Ridge Community Health applied for, to summarize the summary, youth mental health first aid training program to strengthen mental health for students who are attending Henderson County Public Schools, and to support additional trainers who can identify mental health issues at the schools. So again, just a summary of the summary. Blue Ridge Literacy Council had a program to create facilitators that would help adult learners and disproportionately underserved populations with access to technology, which would ultimately improve their economic condition. Children and Family Resource Center had a GLOW mobile, which would offer some preschool learning opportunities and also some developmental screenings before students entered kindergarten officially, and would also help with some basic needs. Flat Rock Playhouse requested some funding to support their operations due to the impacts of COVID, and cited that Hendersonville represents about 25% of their participants each year. And over the period of COVID, they lost an estimated $5 million of revenue. The Hendersonville Theater, similar to Flat Rock Playhouse, cited a need to bolster their operating revenue based on the impacts of COVID. The Housing Assistance Corporation had 2 applications. The first one was for Apple Ridge, and this was specifically for the construction of 60 multifamily units and 20 single-family homes. Specifically, they're requesting the funding for the city to install some needed water and sewer infrastructure for those developments. Yes, ma'am.
In situations like this, if it is a grant pending application for that subdivision, if for instance, we were to allocate the money for that project, but then they didn't get the state grant to build the project, then how would that be determined?
That's a good question. I think we would offer the funding contingent upon them receiving the additional pot of money to fully execute their project. And Mr. Connor or Ms. Beaker can correct me if that's incorrect. But
I think we would, if council chose to spend money in this way, we would hold the money in our account for many reasons, but to hold it to see if the project move forward. And that would go for any project that we're going to recommend to you. We're going to hold the money in the city account until such time as, one, we get all the contract documents drafted, completed, signed, and also to make sure the projects go forward and they can be executed.
And Housing Assistance Corporation's second program was for home repair. So they do have some programs available for Hendersonville's residents to improve their living conditions, improve various amenities in homes to make facilities more livable. And those are specifically targeted at lower income households. Interfaith Assistance Ministry has a food insecurity program in addition to their crisis and utility bill programs that are pre-existing. This funding is specifically to expand their food pantry equipment and storage needs for just food insecurity. Joseph's Outreach Ministries, this one's more commonly referred to as the Connection Center. This will, be a facility for lower served communities to comprehensively be taken care of within the city limits. So it includes showers, laundry, storage, healthy food, mail, just basic quality of life services, and would offer them opportunities to connect with other nonprofits that could provide additional services. The Latino Advocacy Coalition, also known as El Centro, proposed a project to hire a specialist/director to generally bolster community support among the Latino, Latinx community, and empower a holistic lifestyle. I think the core of this was just to provide additional connectivity for those bilingual communities that may not be able to effectively communicate with needed services. The Mills River Partnership, much as in the special appropriations process, requested funding to help stabilize riverbanks, ultimately benefiting the Mills River, which is also one of our water intakes. They aim to mitigate sediment each year and also do some educational programming. Pisgah Legal Services, has a funding request to help low-income clients with SNAP, Medicaid, and other benefits. They provide civil legal services and screenings for specifically low-income members of the community and help them rise out of poverty. SafeLight had 3 applications, the first being the SANE project. To summarize this larger paragraph here, it is to train some sexual assault nurse examiners to better serve members of the community who have been through interpersonal violence, and also train other organizations to identify the outcomes of that interpersonal violence and assist victims. SafeLight's job training program, application number 2, was to help those interpersonal violence survivors with job training skills. They mentioned specifically the Dandelion Cafe and their resale store as skill building opportunities, and are looking for ways to bolster that opportunity for their customers. And finally, their new facility, which I believe has been opened, they are looking for some additional funding to ensure continued connectivity and increased visitorship and usage of their services with this application. Team Echo is looking to expand upon their educational opportunity at their museum and aquarium. And this is in downtown Hendersonville. They did note that they would like to subsidize children's educational opportunities and recover some lost revenue generated by the COVID pandemic. True Ridge is another organization benefiting the Hispanic and Latinx community. They were offering some additional services to help with case management and outreach, kind of bridging the gap between the Hispanic community and folks who can provide them services who may not speak Spanish in a fluent manner or in a manner that is conducive to providing them the services needed. And I believe this is the last one, Western North Carolina Air Museum. This one's pretty obvious. They are an air museum, and they are requesting funding as a result of COVID to continue their educational programming to visitors and residents of Hendersonville. And finally, Mr. Conant's recommendations.
Thank you, Adam. So we took those, all those items, all those requests, and through our ranking process, ranked the top 8, and I think that was anybody that scored 80 points, average 80 points or higher on our ranking. So you can see we narrowed it from over 8.7 million to 4.7, so we cut it almost in half. And then from there, I took it upon myself to look at things that I know that City Council has approached, because we only have $2 million. And through the years, City Council has approached me in many different ways as it relates to dealing with homelessness, dealing with substandard housing, for example. Many or several of you have approached me about a home on 9th Avenue or off 9th Avenue that doesn't have a bathroom and currently using a porta-john in the front yard. Also, from time to time, we'll get issues related to code enforcement and folks that need legal assistance, which we cannot utilize the city attorney to do that, but there's the need to have some legal assistance to help those folks as well as to help the homeless. And then ultimately, job training. So we look for transformative projects, look for projects that would be, new, again, transformative, new, and innovative, where there may not be other funding sources. They could be geared to really benefit the citizens of Hendersonville, where there may not be other funding sources in our community. Projects that have not traditionally gotten funding from the city, and there may be other pots of money to help. For example, the Housing Assistance Corporation project, the $1.6 million number one. We have ARP funding, but we have helped them previously, and this would be a council decision, but we've helped them previously using utility funds because that helps the utility. So I took that out of consideration. So my recommendations are to provide $800,000, which is what the council has previously been requested by the Joseph Outreach Ministry. This would be co-locating a lot of nonprofits to help our folks that are homeless and in crisis. So $800,000 in funds for that. $360,000 that would go. They only requested $250,000, but we know that there's a need in our community for affordable housing, and there are properties around the city that are substandard and need rehabilitation. City community development block grant monies are hard to get, and particularly for scattered sites. So this could be a scattered site grant application, and we are working with Housing Assistance Corporation on a grant for the area behind the police department. But this would allow us to spread the money throughout the community to help folks that do need assistance with housing rehab. And that program could model what the community development block grant program as far as requiring this being a loan, deeds of trust that are forgiven over time. So there's existing legal framework to do that. And then ultimately also partner with Pisgah Legal to help folks in our community who are in need of legal assistance, as was described. Ms. Beaker and Mr. Hyman went and met with the folks from Pisgah Legal and had the conversation about if we use this money, that we could use it and let them work as part of the Connection Center. So there would be that synergy between Pisgah Legal and the folks at Connection Center, if they have space, to make sure that we are providing assistance to those folks in crisis who may help with Medicaid issues, Social Security issues, which include disability, other kinds of bureaucratic type things that you may need legal rental assistance, those kind of things. And then ultimately thought that Safe Light, on-the-job training for folks that may be working at Dandelion and the thrift store would be a good opportunity there. And then finally, I attended ICMA last week, and one of the things that we have seen, or that is becoming more popular around the country, is social worker folks embedded in local government to serve as those case managers to help the police department, to help the fire department. Example, a fire department from time to time will get frequent calls from the same address because that person is alone, that may be disabled, and it may just need lifting assistance, may need and sometimes just lonely. And by having someone that can become a case manager and help deal with that situation, to contact family, to contact other resources, would be beneficial, as well as this person also could serve as that liaison for our law enforcement as it relates to whether it's mental health crisis, drug issues, or homelessness, and help folks get to where they need the resources they need. And so ultimately, we would keep $500,000 to fund a pilot program where we embedded at least one social worker type position in our organization to serve as a crisis manager. And it doesn't have to be law enforcement and fire. It can also be code enforcement, where we may have an elderly person. The example was given from the city of Glenwood, Colorado, at the conference, that they had an elderly person who had a tree who fell in their yard, but they didn't know how to, and code enforcement was asking for the tree to be removed, but they didn't have the resources or know how to get it done. So this crisis management person, code enforcement contacts them, they make the contact, and they can help, find nonprofits, churches to help remove the tree. So there's lots of potential resources. So those are the 8 are our ranked projects. The ones on the right, you'll see the 4 plus the city project are simply a recommendation. We wanted to bring you some ideas and then turn it over to the city council to make the discussion, have a discussion, and make your own decisions. But we wanted to kind of give you some ideas of how it could be spent. So,
Comments, questions?
I have a question on the crisis response position. So the $500,000 is obviously not for just a position. So how would that money be utilized?
So, actually the way we looked at it is, wasn't quite sure whether to be 1 or 2 positions, but we would fund it, felt like it would fund it over multiple years. So it could be, by the time you have salary and then a vehicle, that could hopefully, if you funded one position, it could be 4 or 5 years of funding there to fund that position to see how it works. Mm-hmm. If you decided we needed 2 people, then you would have that funding source for probably 3 years, 2.5, 3 years as a pilot program. So I plugged in $500,000 there just so that, because we know it'll take a little while to get it up and running and see if it works. We feel like we may get some efficiency, particularly in the police department. It may help deal with victims and other things, that it may help take some of the pressure off patrol officers and things. So that's the kind of the theory behind it. And that was the presentation I heard, the idea that, you could take some pressure off other departments, other personnel. So.
And it could be expended within the time limits of the ARP.
Yeah, do we have?
That's a good point.
It has to be spent by 2026.
It doesn't, actually, this good, so this money, Go ahead, Ms. Beaker.
No, go ahead.
You did the magic, so you go ahead.
No, so we are doing the transplantation of funds. We're using the revenue replacement funds from ARP for salaries. Really, Brian should be doing this, not me. But anyway, so that frees up those salary monies, which are local dollars that don't have federal strings attached to them, to use for ARP-related purposes. So I have explained, remember I showed you guys a chart about the green funds and the yellow funds and all of that? Well, bottom line is, this is not subject to the federal strings, so it doesn't have to be spent in 2 years. We did it in a way so that it could be stretched out over a longer period of time.
Is the thought that we would start with one?
I think that would be the initial, that we would start with one and get it started and then go from there.
What department would that position be under?
So the example that we've seen a different couple of models across the nation. In some cases, they're actually embedded in the police department, but answer to city administration, just because they're more often going to be used by the police, and you want that connectivity. But also, they work for other departments, so we didn't. The model was not to put it under the police chief, but put it under the city manager's office. But you could embed it in several different places, whether it's police, community development, I think would be the two primary, or even in administration, to serve as just as that liaison for the manager and the council, so, and the rest of the staff.
Other questions? I have one comment. Fiscal Legal, probably every other month I get a phone call or email from somebody with issues that the city can't deal with, and I have made a number of referrals to Fiscal Legal, folks that need that kind of help. It's not in the city's purview, so I definitely support Fiscal Legal. In question year one, it says city manager ranking recommendations year one.
Oh.
Or is,
Actually, there's only 1 year, so,
okay. I want to be clear about that.
yes, sorry, Mayor. It's so here's the with the additional caveat that, if some of this money is not spent, there may be the ability to reallocate it in the future. I mean, if for some reason, the money is not spent, or we can't, whether it's our position or Joseph's outreach ministry or whatever the case may be, there may be funding available if that money is not spent.
Can I ask a question of you, either Brian or Angie? This is once again timing. The organizations receiving this money, do they also not have a time frame in which they must spend the money?
So this is going to be different if City Council agrees with these, and we are not asking you to vote, of course, this evening. We put it back on an October agenda, but it would be, each contract is going to be structured uniquely. So like, for instance, the Pisgah Legal, I talked with them about a 2-year pilot program to serve the clients of the Connection Center. That this is not to be overflow of people who can't get in your other office. This is people coming through the Connection Center that need these legal support services to help them overcome barriers to getting housing or becoming healthy, or, so that one would be a 2-year contract, and that would probably be structured that the money would be doled out a month in advance with reporting back and everything. Finance director says that we're earning good interest on this money, and so we need to keep it in our bank, not lump sum it out. And so, most of this would be not the Connections Center 800,000, but the rest would be given out as it's needed. It wouldn't be lump sum appropriations. And so the Connection Center, we would have to figure out the best way to structure that. I mean, we can provide assistance legally, but we have to structure it appropriately in the way that it'll best serve them. And so I can't tell you what form that might take today, but we would be bringing back contracts for you to approve as we get those details worked out. housing assistance, as we would identify a grant or a program or a project, that would come back to you. So I guess Safe Light, maybe that would be a lump sum appropriation, because it's just not a lot of money. So sorry, that's probably more information than you wanted, but each one's going to have to be tailored to the project.
Well, can I ask a question about, you mentioned the housing assistance one. So like, we know that that's being used for repairs of existing housing,
Correct.
but we're saying that we would not just cut them a check?
Nope. So the existing CDBG program that we have, I think we would want to model it after that, but it's actually a forgivable construction loan where the city, we make sure that they have only a primary mortgage and no other liens or judgments against the property. The city does a construction loan where the checks are cut directly to the contractor. And then for every year that they live in it or it is occupied by a low to moderate income person, a certain amount of that loan gets forgiven. And that way, if they were to sell it to a fair market value purchaser, the city would get its money back and could reinvest that in somebody else. So, and with regards to the current CDBG program that we have, I met with them a couple weeks ago, and the estimates that we have are old. They were before all this housing, and so they're going to have to be updated. So I think a little bit of that cushion might be to help fund the overruns on the money that's already been approved.
John, you probably told us this already, but is there someone we're hiring to figure out all this stuff? To keep up with all these little things you just described, which sound complicated.
For the forgivable loan programs, we're going to have a third-party loan servicer. I've spoken to, who is it that we have for the other program?
Mountain Bizwork?
Mountain Bizworks, to see if they would service them for us and keep up with those things. With regards to Pisgah Legal, I would view that as a quarterly report that we would get. Right now, it would be your
Okay.
administrative staff,
It'll be the team,
Adam and
and Jenny Floyd's been
Jenny,
hired,
and,
so,
yeah.
Okay.
so we, as our new, budget analyst, so.
Any other questions, comments? Okay, at this point, there is no vote being taken on it. So if you still want to think about it for a while, we do have time.
So as Angie said, we'll put it back on your October 6th agenda and let you make, and we'll be glad to answer any questions. Again, these are just recommendations and answer any questions.
And thank you all for everyone who was on the committee and who crunched all these numbers and thought carefully about how we should spend this money. So thank you all. Okay. We do have a closed session that has been requested. If we could have a motion to go into closed session.
Madam Mayor, I move that City Council enter closed session pursuant to North Carolina General Statute 143-318.11A 1, 3, and 6 to prevent the disclosure of information that is privileged or confidential pursuant to the law of this state of the United States or not considered a public record within the meaning of Chapter 132 of the General Statutes, to consult with an attorney employed or retrained by the public body in order to preserve the attorney-client privilege between the attorney and the public body, and to consider the qualifications, competence, performance, character, fitness of an individual public officer or employee.
Is there any discussion? Not all in favor of entering closed session, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Ayes have it, motion carries, and we will go into closed